Hey guys, it's Stephanie with the Eagle View. I just wanted to get a few things out of the way first. Firstly, thank you to Stephanie Morris for allowing us to interview her. We really appreciate all that you did for us in order to learn about the CAST program. Number two, just to put a few trigger warnings in here, there is talk in this video of child abuse, SA, and rape, along with substance use. So if any of those topics are too triggering for you, maybe go check out some of our other content on YouTube and Facebook. I also put some trigger warnings in the video itself, so if you want to skip past those parts, feel free to do so. And finally, this is one of our longest videos. If you want to, feel free to listen to it as a podcast. It's a very informative interview, and I would definitely recommend learning as much as you can about our CAST program. So thank you and enjoy the video.
Know that people are leaving with more skills than they came. For example, the Arkansas Law Enforcement Training Academy, which is where brand new police recruits. I think it's a 16-week, it's a multi-week course that they go through as they're first learning how to be police officers. Before they started partnering with NWACC, they would do their domestic violence and child maltreatment training in an abandoned house.
Okay.
And it's a great tool. I'm not knocking that tool, but since they started coming with us, they get to knock on a door for the very first time and have an actor, but they get to have an interaction that instead of doing that in the real world for the very first time. And so they are, instead of going through an abandoned house and thinking about, oh, how would I react if there was a child in this room? We actually put an actor who is a child in the room, and they get to practice those skills.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I know the Law Enforcement Training Academy would say that they're putting out better police officers as a result of the time they get to spend in our house. And they've been coming back, and they come 3 times a year. I think they're probably on year 7 now of doing it. It's that important to them.
You talked about the actors. So like, do the people come in and they're just completely blind and the actors are like, okay, this is what we're going to do?
It typically, we have a scenario written, and so I'll have, I don't write scripts because these things, you have to be able to ebb and flow a little bit, but I will write someone a character profile. And so you might get a profile that says, you are a single mom, you have 3 kids, you work nights as a waitress, and give them their profile, and then they're free to interact with that, thinking about that character. That way, if someone comes in and they are naive or a little too trusting, then they may not get all the details, and that actor can decide, how much am I going to get? Or if someone comes in and acts rudely or aggressively or judgmental, how this house is so dirty, how could you live like this? Then they also have the ability to then withhold information or give more information or cuss and carry on. It really it allows our actors to shift depending on the treatment they feel like they're receiving by the student or the professional.
Yeah.
So they get those profiles, and then there's a basic scenario that they play out, but it is different. I have 4 main simulations I do, and they come out differently every single time because of that flexibility.
Do you use the same actors every time?
I have some go-tos, but a lot of them are professionals in a very stressful field, and if they get a phone call to go to a scene, then they've got to go. And so sometimes I have to bring extra people in. I'm always looking for people who are interested. I have this dream that our theater department would collaborate with me, and maybe one day we can get that going. Or we may have some theater students who are looking for a little bit of experience.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I think so too. So one day I think we'll be able to make that happen.
So how far do people come to do your program?
Yeah, it really from all over the state of Arkansas. We've got a training next week that will have people from all four corners of the state. And then we draw a little bit from Missouri and Oklahoma. And occasionally we at one point we had a much bigger national footprint. Since COVID, people are traveling much less, and we do some virtual online trainings, and we do still draw from a national audience for those. But I think everyone is seeing that people are staying closer to home, or they're doing virtual trainings now.
How do you do you do a walkthrough in the virtual training, or?
Yeah, we do. So we have a virtual house that we can use. And we're limited in which scenarios because they've got to be staged and recorded, and it's pretty pricey to set those up. But we do have a couple of virtual options that we can use to do a virtual simulation as well.
That's cool, yeah.
Yeah, I really, and that is for the benefit of the NWACC students that we have that, because I want CAST is offered online and in person, and I want the online students to get as close to the same experience as the in-person students. And so when they do that simulation, they don't get to walk through the house, but they can do, have you ever done one of the real estate? It's called a Matterport. The real estate where you can click through the different rooms, and that's what we do.
So can they interact with people when they do that?
They are, yeah. So the nature of online classes, I can't require it because online classes are asynchronous, but I always give my students the option to set up a group, a Zoom or a Teams meeting like this, where they can just go through it together. Like, I could show it to you. Would you like to see it?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so it really, I'll try not to make you dizzy, but we can click through, and there's all these points of interest. We can, should have warned you that there could be some graphic stuff in here. I'll try to be careful not to click on things that are too disturbing. There's.
And are these photos from your set?
So this is actually a set from, there are CAST institutions all across the country, and we try to help each other. So this is actually from the University of St. Louis, Missouri, but is similar. Our house is 2 stories, but we have, similar layout with, bedroom, living room, kitchen, bathroom, that sort of thing. So you can look at the ceiling. You'll see that, theirs has some 2-way mirrors. We actually have a video recording system. I'll show you, like, there's some, no, I was looking for, there's a hole in the wall where I'm looking for, there's drugs stashed. And I can also show you, like, and when I go into the child's bedroom here, there's some really there's some very disturbing stuff in here. So just be prepared. Here's a doll, and then when you do a close-up on the doll, you'll see that the child has damaged the doll, and this is an investigation that involves some sexual abuse. So when I click on that, don't be surprised, but you can see where she's drawn on the doll. And so, yeah, we want them to go through that and be detectives and find all the things that are hidden in the house. And then they'll have to decide, they'll have decision points after that. Do we need to remove these children? Are they safe with their mom? If we separate them from their dad, who is actually the abuser? What forms of abuse did you see in the house? And they have to take it from there and decide what to do next.
Class like a Socratic discussion, or is it writing papers, or?
It's a little bit of both. And we have a lot of class discussion, either online or in person. I do have them at the end of the simulation that I just showed you. They have to write a paper about what their next steps would be. And because everybody's going to have a little bit different idea, and we talk about it in class first, and then they will work through what they would recommend and what they want to do next with the family and for the kids, what services they would provide, safety plans, that sort of thing.
How many classes do you have, and like how many students are in each class?
Yeah, so there are 3 core CAST classes. One that's called Child Abuse and Neglect Perspectives, and it is the survey of what are the different types of abuse, what are the different systems, DHS, law enforcement, court, that would respond. One of the others is called used to be called Systems Response. We changed the name because that was a bad name. Now it's called Child Abuse Investigations. And that is takes that perspectives class one step further, where on the first day of class, I give them a scenario, and then we spend the entire semester investigating that through the help of a bunch of guest speakers, local professionals. And so we bring a law enforcement officer in, and he gives us some feedback, and then we see what we like and don't like about that feedback. And then we'll have someone from DHS come in, and we'll continue our investigation that way. And then I round that semester out with another simulation where they're on their own. They don't have the help of that professional. They have to make their own decisions. And then the third class is called Prevention and Treatment. And it is more aimed at how do we stop it before it starts? All the other 2 classes are more about intervention. Someone has experienced abuse, a hotline call's been made, and now we've got to do something about it. And so the prevention class looks at adverse childhood experiences, things that we can, maybe red flags that we can watch for so that we can stop abuse before it gets to be abuse.
Yeah. So are there any prerequisites, or can students just sign up and walk in?
You can just sign up and walk in. I recommend that they take the perspectives class first, but it's not required. And often students will take more than one class at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Is there any like weeding out of other students at the very beginning, being like, there's going to be some traumatic stuff, we're going to get this out of the way?
Yeah.
So what's that like?
We spend the first class period really talking and preparing for, you're going to see and discuss some very difficult material. I'm not a licensed therapist. This is not the place for that. And because it's a classroom, we can't, I can refer people, but I can't be your therapist. And so we have to lay that out. If it's going to be hard, what are your options? And so I usually, if I can get them in the first week of class, as soon as I can, the Counseling and Wellness Center always comes into the class to let them know what resources are available. And then we also, in that very first week, ask everyone to set up a self-care plan for, even if you think maybe you don't have your own childhood trauma and you think you can handle this stuff, and 8 weeks in, it feels like it's a lot. What are you going to do? And we work through how to handle the stress that can come with looking at a doll who's been, mutilated by a child. It's you never know how people are going to react to that. So you have to be really careful. And we do a lot of step back, take a breath. What do you need? Is this too much? And if it is, how do we alter assignments and things?
That's good. That's good. So like, what does the self-care look like for the
students? So it's different for everybody. And that's, one of the things we talk about is, my self-care is baking. When my world is chaotic and stressful and I can't control all of that, I can control the sugar and the butter and the flour. And that's how I bring myself back to a more neutral place. For you, that might be running, or it might be reading a book or taking a bath. And so we talk about having different outlets. And I usually encourage people to have one that is something you can do by yourself, and one that is something that you can do in the community, and one that is something you do with a friend or a family member or another trusted person.
That's good. So what got you into this field, and like, why are you so interested in it?
Yeah, so I was a deputy prosecutor for about 12 years. I was on the job about 6 months before they handed me my very first child rape case. And to be quite frank, I had no business handling it. I had in law school not 1 minute of training on how to prepare kids for court, how to talk to kids. I was young. I wasn't a mother yet. I didn't know how to talk to kids. I'd had some babysitting gigs, but that doesn't, it was, this is really different. And I decided to seek out some training because it was pretty clear that they were going to keep giving me these kinds of cases and I needed to learn how to do it. So I went to a forensic interview training called Child First, which is the training that we're hosting next week in the training center, and just started seeing that there are better ways. That very first case resulted in a life sentence for a man who was sexually abusing his niece. And so it looks like a huge success on paper. We got a life sentence, but for me, it is not a success because I had a 9-year-old girl that I brought to the courthouse over and over and over again, getting her ready for court. What I was really doing was getting me ready for court. And, when the whole thing was over and I looked at her and she wasn't excited by this win, and I was so excited, we won, we got a life sentence. And I realized that we maybe got a life sentence at her expense. And it's not okay for the system to continue the victimization of someone. We have to do better. And so that's just became my passion, I guess, and really making sure that we are equipping people to do better. And when NWACC started, when they first started the CAST program, there wasn't a dedicated CAST instructor because it is multidisciplinary. You just had instructors from all over the social and behavioral sciences division teaching, and it wasn't a unified position. And in 2019, they created this CAST coordinator. And so it was a brand new position, and they asked if I was interested in it. And I was, of course, because it is such a great way to still do something I really care about and just impact a little bit differently than I could in the courtroom.
So it's been your baby since the very beginning.
Yeah. I really never, when I went to law school, never ever imagined this is the direction I would go. And it was really that first case that it sounds really really bad to say that first child rape case hooked me, but it did. That's what got my interest. And where I'm saying this, I was mad, quite frankly, that why did no one teach me any of this stuff? It's pretty ridiculous that we have professionals going out in the field who don't have the training they need to actually handle these cases.
Mm-hmm. So what sort of training have you gotten? Like, have you gone all over and just collected it all?
Yeah. So, that very first training I went to was called Child First. And then from there on out, I've really just tried to keep an eye on what's out there. And, I have done lots of training in adverse childhood experiences, which are you familiar with ACEs?
Slightly for
okay.
minutes.
A lot of people aren't, so I'm impressed that you are. It's a study that was done in 2005, came out early 2000s, that looked at traumatic experiences, not necessarily abuse, like losing a parent to cancer or divorce is traumatic, right? But there's no wrongdoing there, and how those experiences and also abuse affect our health across a lifetime. And the more of those adverse experiences you have, the more likely you are to have heart disease, gastrointestinal disease, asthma, and then also substance abuse and suicide and all the other things. So I'm fascinated by that, and I've done I look for trainings on that as much as I can. And then I also try to seek out training on trauma-informed responses and understanding how trauma shapes our behaviors. And people don't always act the way we expect they're going to act when they're the victim of trauma.
Yeah.
I always ask people, if you've ever been in a car accident, How a lot of people after a car accident, they're crying, they're upset, or some of them jump out of the car and they're mad. And we have these reactions that are outside of our control sometimes. And that's trauma. And so educating myself and other people about those reactions.
So it's not really just physical, getting the child away from the situation, it's mental too.
Yeah, I think people are really quick to judge our DHS, especially saying, why wouldn't they remove that child? That child should have been removed, without really stopping to think about that it may be a crummy world that child is living in, but it is their whole world. And when you remove them from that, it doesn't always have, we have good intentions, it doesn't always have good impacts, because you're separating them from everything they know. And if you think about even just the first time you stepped on campus at NWACC, you were probably nervous. You were probably a little anxious. Where do I go? Where do I park? Where are the bathrooms? And then imagine you're 7 and you're in a whole new home. And that level of anxiety, even if what was happening at home was bad, it was still yours.
Yeah. So is the CAST program just for the children, or does it also help like their parents or?
Yeah. So we just did a module in one of my classes about helping parents and supporting what we would call a non-offending caregiver, a parent that wasn't involved in an abuse scenario. And they very often need as much or more support even than the kids do. And that's part of that trauma-informed response, where we look at the family unit and even the community as a whole. If a child discloses abuse to their teacher, that teacher is also going to be affected by that. And so how do we make sure that teacher can go back into his or her classroom and still continue to teach? And it is to look at the whole system of support, not just the child.
Okay.